Okay. Well, good afternoon or good evening or good morning to some of you. Thank you so much for joining a glimpse into urban planning. My name is Kimberly and I'm your host and your moderator today. And we'll be hosting a webinar that's focused on the fascinating urban planning industry. So we've got an awesome group lined up here of panelists, and I'm sure you're eager to hear from them. So here's what you can expect out of this hour. After we hear an introduction from each of the panelists, I'll be asking the questions that will help get the conversation going. And in the second part of this panel, we'll open up the floor to the audience to ask questions related to urban planning. So if you have a question you would like us to answer, please type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And to keep it simple, do not ask questions in the chat box. Just keep it in the Q&A box so that I can keep track of all the questions being asked. The chat box is there for you guys to converse and leave comments in if you so please. And so as your moderator, I'll be keeping an eye on timing and watching all the questions that come in. And since this is just an introduction to urban planning, the goal is to answer questions that are often asked by current students or those planning to become a student in the near future. So that means we won't necessarily have time to talk about theoretical debates or how urban planning can fix homelessness, for example. So believe me, I wish we would have the time for all of these amazing thoughts and ideas. And if there is enough interest, I'd be happy to host more niche webinars for these in-depth conversations at a later time. But just for today, we've only got the hour. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm going to pass the mic over to the panelists for their little intro. Raphael, can you get started?
Sure. Thank you very much for hosting this amazing event. I hope this is the first of a series of events like this one. I'm very excited about talking with different people from all over the world. And well, you need us to do a quick intro about yourself, is that it?
Yes, just what your current role is, your educational background. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Raphael. I don't know if it's written on your screen there. I don't know if I set it up on Zoom.
You're good.
I'm from Brazil. I'm Brazilian, and I was born here, and I live here for most of my life. And I graduated in architecture about 16 years ago. And I got into urban planning about 30 years ago, actually, when my father bought the first version of SimCity. And I haven't switched out from urban planning ever since. But I actually only gotten into urban planning full-time more recently, about 2 years ago. And I'm currently director of research for the city of Belo Horizonte, for the urban planning secretariat of the city of Belo Horizonte. And that's it. I've worked most of my life in architecture or urban planning, urban design, something like that. But only recently, when I took up this position as director of research, is that I became a full-blown urban planner. Very excited to be here.
Amazing. Max, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Max. I currently live and grew up in Washington, D.C. in the United States. I am a park planner right now for Arlington County, which is like a neighboring municipality. I recently graduated with my master's degree in urban planning in 2018. Before that, I worked in the nonprofit sector with a couple of different environmental nonprofits. And yeah, anything else I need to get?
Sorry, well, where did you study?
Oh, I studied at the University of Pittsburgh for undergrad and Virginia Commonwealth University, which is located in Richmond, for my master's degree.
Okay, amazing. I'm going to pass it on to Lieven next.
Hi, Kim and everyone. So my name is Lieven. I'm an urban planner from the Netherlands, specializing in transportation planning. I graduated in transportation planning at the American University of Sharjah in the Middle East 5 years ago. And at the moment, I'm working for one of the biggest infrastructure companies in the Netherlands as a tendering specialist. So what that means is I submit tenders to bring in more work for the company. Before that, I lived in the UK for 5 years, where I was working for the city of Liverpool as a traffic planner. And I also worked as a consultant in AECOM. And at the moment, I'm living in Rotterdam.
Amazing. And sorry, your education in the Middle East, was that a bachelor's or a master's?
Masters.
Okay, amazing. Alex, please.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's I started at 4 a.m. this morning to be here, so there's no one in the office, as you can see. So my name's Alex Steffen. I'm from Brisbane, Australia. I'm the director of Steffen Town Planning. We're a private consultant town planning firm that specializes in development assessment. So I've been the director here for 12 years, and I've been an urban planner for 15 years. And I studied a Bachelor of Urban and Environmental Planning at Griffith University here in Brisbane, Australia. So born, bred, educated, and work in the same place.
Amazing. I'll pass it on to Kendra next.
So I'm from Arizona and I go to Arizona State University. I'm a last year graduate student in the Urban Environmental Planning program there. And I've lived and been born here my whole life. I do want to try to go outside of my state, but I've done quite a few different planning jobs, and right now I'm a planning intern for the public sector.
Thank you, Kendra. And finally, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm currently doing my Master's of Spatial Analysis at Ryerson University here in Toronto. I did my undergrad at University of Toronto, majoring in city studies with minors in GIS and applied stats. In the past, I've interned at Metrolinx, the provincial transit agency, at the Chief Planning Office, as well as worked with the city planning team at the City of Toronto.
Amazing. All right, this is our team of panelists. Thank you so much, guys. Well, let's get started. I'm seeing some messages come in. This is awesome. Thank you for the comments, guys. I'm loving to hear where you're coming from and who you are. So thank you for that. So we'll start up with questions coming from me, panelists. What got you into, and anyone can go first. What got you into planning, and what made you choose the position that you're in right now?
I'll go first since I'm a student. I got into planning because I was planning a trip with one of my friends one year, and I was like, wow, I'm really good at this. What kind of jobs can planners do? And I was in community college at the time, so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was in veterinary science, and I looked up planning jobs, and I was just thrilled with the diversity of jobs, and I really thought I could do something like that, and it was like impactful.
Amazing.
I'm happy to jump on. I at school was very lost in terms of what I wanted to do with my life, and I went to my school teachers and just said, I really love geography, I love earth sciences, I have a bit of a passion about the environment. What should I do? And at the time, Griffith University just launched this degree called Urban and Environmental Planning, and I thought, well, that's kind of geography and environment wrapped up into the one degree. And I kind of didn't even care where I ended up from that. I wanted to save the environment, but ultimately I was just like, well, I want to keep studying. I like studying. Chuck me into uni. I like geography. I like sciences. So that's kind of literally how I just got into it.
Yeah. I can go next. Like I said, the SimCity, that's a very strong influence. Of course, more recently, Cities Skylines is a very good alternative too. But my father was an architect and urban planner. He was a professor of urbanism in Brazil. And but I've never thought I would go into urban planning until very recently. I became an architect. In Brazil, you become an architect and urban planner at the same time. It's like the same major. And for most of my professional life, I was an architect and I designed projects and sometimes of the urban scale, but not particularly. I spent some time in an office in France and Morocco that worked with occasionally urban planning as well, and they planned the 2 new cities in Morocco. So we started to get a feel of the current status of urban planning profession. But about a couple of years ago, like I said, in the beginning of last year, actually, the people of the city, you know, of urban planning, they were looking for someone. We've had some pretty big changes in the master plan in Belo Horizonte right now. They're looking for someone who had a background in designing buildings and urban areas, but also who had good notions about urban planning. So they had a lot of people who very specialists in architecture or very specialists in urban planning, but not a lot of people that understood a little bit of both, and that worked transversally in the fields of knowledge of urban planning. So they invited me to take up this position, and I felt that it was a very exciting thing to do because I was a little bit fed up with working with architectural design, to be honest, and I said sure. And I've been, I have some background in economics as well, so, and that's like the main thing that I like about urban planning is that it's very transversal, right? More than probably any other profession. And that's how I got into urban planning. They needed this profile, and they had a lot of people with very much specialists in any given area, but they didn't find a lot of people who had a little bit of experience in very different fields. And I think that's very important in urban planning. When you're discussing urban policies and negotiating anything related to zoning and urban planning, it helps a lot to have worn someone else's shoes for a while and know where they're coming from.
Right.
And so that's how I became an urban planner, and I'm very glad.
Amazing.
It was through this path.
Amazing. I'm gonna pass it on to Max next. Also, Max, in addition to your to what got you into it, tell us about more about your role. What is your day-to-day like?
Yeah. So when I think the United States does a really bad job of like selling what urban planning is. I didn't even know it existed when I started my undergrad degree. I initially was going for a mechanical engineering degree, and I failed calculus a couple times and was like, maybe I don't need a mechanical engineering degree. And I took an urban studies class, had no idea what it was. It sounded interesting, and it just kind of stuck. I fell in love with it and helped me get to where I am today. So like I said earlier, I'm a park planner. So the reason I got into parks was just kind of, they're always interesting to me. When I was a kid, my parents were part of an advocacy group that turned an overgrown cemetery into a dog park here in DC. And so like all my baby pictures are like on tombstones, and like I have memories of playing tag on top of mausoleums and stuff like that. And so like green space and like this location where sort of social class goes to dissolve, everyone's the same when you're in a park, is kind of how I fell in love with it. And when I got the opportunity to join a park planning kind of section in Arlington County, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So that's how I got into it.
Thank you, Max. And Levin, can you tell us, again, repeat what your current role is, and what, can you describe what your current day-to-day job is like?
Yeah, definitely. So at the moment, I'm a tendering specialist for a contractor. What that means is that I have to submit proposals for large pieces of infrastructure like train stations, new highways, etc. To cities. They review it, and then they tell us that we can do it. My day-to-day involves a lot of discussing. So I'm trying to nudge the civil engineers and the architects in our company to think about ways to build what we want to build just a little bit differently on a human scale with the customer in mind. So yeah, you definitely need that soft skill. I also need to do a lot of research, find out what the demographics are like, what traffic is like in the area where we're doing the work. I need to contact stakeholders in areas where we want to build new things, anticipate all their concerns, address them in our plan, come up with travel plans in case we need to do a traffic diversion, for example. And I guess probably the biggest chunk of what I do every day is writing, because all the info that I'm gathering from these different people needs to be presented to the authorities that we're doing the work for. And traditionally writing that in big documents still is the way to do that. So.
Awesome. And Alex, can you please describe what your day-to-day job is like?
Yeah, mine kind of sounds a bit similar to Levin's, really. My job as a development consultant is kind of pulling together a team of people to address the local and state, planning provisions. So we work in the private sector. We essentially fight council and state government for a living, which sounds horrible, but in the reality, that's what we do. We like to say that we negotiate and mediate to get the best outcome for everyone, but really, our client's the one who pays the bills. So, I mean, an average day is really quite similar to Levin. I mean, we pull together teams. It's a lot of people management. We don't have in-house engineers, so we subcontract all of that kind of work. I actually wrote down just this morning, a good example of, the day-to-day. Like this morning, I need to go into a state heritage listed building for a simple shop fit out. So they're just doing a shop fit out, and that requires some planning advice. We're negotiating the number of stories in a development because of a technicality that a local council introduced via an interpretation guideline halfway through our assessment. And then we just last Friday gave some written advice to a client, giving them 3 different options on proceeding with a development project that had all the pros, cons, timeframes, and costs associated. And then just this morning, I've seen that he's decided to go ahead with one of those. So now it's my job to find an economist, civil engineer, traffic engineer, arborist, ecologist, bring them all onto the team, make sure they can all work together well, and then start pulling together, this thick of documents to lodge it to local council and start negotiations.
Fun stuff. All right. So I'll get a couple of you to answer this if you'd like. What do you like the most about your job, and what do you dislike the most? Anyone can go.
Go ahead. I think something that I really appreciate about working in the urban planning field is that, for the most part, the people you're going to be working with are kind of like on the same wavelength as you. So like you have similar passions, you have you care about similar things. So you're able to just kind of, I don't know, for me, I feel like I'm able to be myself when I'm working and with the people I'm working with. Everyone loves parks. Let's try to make a cool park. So we like talking about stuff like that. So I really appreciate that aspect of the field.
I'm happy to go. Our job, we're very much at the mercy of large government bodies to make decisions. So something that I very, very much dislike about my job is like the fluid nature of the interpretation of state policy. So, for example, we have 520 different local council regions in Australia, which isn't that many, considering some areas have that just in one city. But each of them have similar but different state legislation, and then each local council can interpret the same definition a different way. So whilst we're dealing with, Brisbane City Council where I live, they'll interpret like something like story is a great example. I'm doing a negotiation for that today. They interpret story differently to the same a different local council, just one south. And it's the same state policy, it's the same state definition, but they have 2 completely different interpretations of it. So that absolutely destroys my life. That's probably one core thing that I do in my job is know those intricacies. But the thing that I love about it is all that mediation and negotiation. I liken our jobs to like we're lesser paid lawyers. Like we're the ones who are really battling it out in the field before it gets into court. So you can kind of, it's more without prejudice, and you can kind of throw around whatever you want with kind of little repercussions. But I love the negotiation and mediation. It's really good fun. That's me done.
I've actually, one of the things that made me accept the job at the city was that I was a little bit tired of fighting the government, because I think that happens all over the world. My experience in France and Morocco was kind of like the same thing. Like you're just fighting for interpretations, and your common sense is often missed by a long shot when you're interpreting a piece of legislation. So I decided to, like I've said elsewhere, like to wear this hat right now, and I was able, fortunately, so far, to be a part of rewriting legislation and simplifying it a lot and make it clearer and with no like room for interpretations and all that. And so far, it's working out okay. I mean, usually the response I get from people like you, who go to the city and was like, is it really that simple? People are like very suspicious of, yeah, you can go ahead. It is that simple. If you do it like this, you got, your permit is ready in 1 week. That's it. So I think, like I said, when you switch places, I think a lot of good can come from that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. And so let's get more into that public versus private sector, pros and cons of both. Levin, you're in the private sector, right?
I am, and I used to work in the public sector. I loved working in the public sector, but I thought that things moved a little bit slower there. It was hard to get people that were in their seat for 20 years to convince them to do things a little bit differently, and the things that you were taught in school isn't always the way that they do things in the authority you work in. Private sector is quicker to respond, but private sector sometimes the integrity aspect is lost. So if you want to introduce something that costs a lot of money and they don't consider it cost efficient, they would let go of it even when it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, there's the balance in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think for the public sector, one thing I dislike about it is that oftentimes I'm seeing out someone else's like goals. So I'm at the behest of the county manager, for example, in Arlington. And while I may, as like a planner, not agree with, or as an individual, not agree with, like I sometimes I'd wish that the county would go a little bit further on some of the things they're trying to achieve. It really is limiting sometimes for like, okay, we can't push it this far because the elected officials may not approve it. So it's better to kind of like pick and choose your battles. And that actually inspired me to run for public office in DC. There's a very, very hyper local position called the Advisory Neighborhood Commission. Basically, you're representative of a small area of 2,000 people, but they make decisions on very neighborhood level planning issues like housing, transportation, zoning. And so I figured that at least from this perspective, I can be the one who's making those decisions. And then the people who work for the city will then have to see out my dream and what I think DC should look like. So, yeah.
That's amazing, Max. I'm really excited for you. That's an awesome position.
I'm running unopposed, so I've already won.
Oh,
Pat
okay.
myself on the back on that one.
Nice. Amazing.
Oh no, don't you keep going. I was just gonna say another thing from the private sector, but
yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that the issue that we find in Australia anyway with the difference between private and public sector employees generally is very political in Australia. Like nothing happens in planning, and it doesn't sound like it happens in America either, from Max's point of view, without the local politicians getting involved. And the issue with the local politicians is, yesterday they could have been a bus driver. Today they're now in charge of $100 million developments that people have sunk millions of dollars into development for, and they can just change their mind. They might get a complaint from someone and they just go, you know what, let's not approve that, figure out a way to refuse it. So at that point, kind of urban planning goes completely out the door, and it becomes a popularity contest with whatever local member, wants to win the votes for the next election. So that it's extremely frustrating. And I think if you worked, and I've never worked in the public sector, so I'm only saying this from suspicion, but I think it would be very demoralizing working for the public sector, depending on where you are. Like, you would think and feel that this is going to be a good outcome, or this is going to be a terrible outcome. And no matter what your opinion is, sometimes someone's just going to tap you on the shoulder and say, it doesn't matter what your opinion is, approve that or refuse it, even if it goes against every single part of your planning and moral, body, mind. So that's probably the difference. We don't have that kind of conflict in the private sector, because you can elect to take on a job or not. So if you don't agree with something, you just go, look, this isn't, I'm not the consultant for you, so find someone else. So we don't have as many conflicts like that. But that in Australia is a very key difference between public and private, in my opinion, that is.
Yeah, that sounds like that basically sums it up. Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Okay, moving on to the next question. Let's talk about COVID. How do you think the global pandemic has affected your job and the industry? Levin, let's start with you.
For me, wait, am I still? No, I'm not on mute. It's affected my work a lot, because most of the work I do now is from home, and it's not as easy to try and convince people or to get information out of them when they don't need to collaborate as much. They can very easily not have their camera on, and that does make a lot of difference. But for the industry in general, I don't think it's affected much. The Dutch economy is quite resilient, and public infrastructure investment is probably increasing now, because there's a lot of infrastructure that's 60, 70 years old that needs to be replaced. So I'd say there's more work now than ever. The only downside is we need to manage to deal with that increasing workload with less effectivity, because we need to do more from a distance. There's less contact with people where you get information from that you could use to get better plans. So yeah, that's it. Probably increasing productivity, more boring, but the work is definitely still there.
All right. Anyone else want to add in? Rafael?
Here in Brazil, everyone's working from home still. The first impact that we've had was that there was a lot of things we had to do. We're still having to do related to the pandemic. So, distributing, food for whoever needs it and can't get it because, they had like an informal job or something like that. A lot of very specific actions. We've done as a department of research, we've done a lot of analysis, and they're still doing a lot of analysis about, hotspots of the disease. And so we've been working directly with it, like really intensely. For the long term, I think the main difference is that everyone's working from home. And I particularly think that's very good, because I have a 3-month-old boy, and I've been able to spend a lot of time with him in this very critical period of our lives. And it's very likely that we're going to can continue at least partially working from home. So we've realized we can maybe give back some of the buildings that the city rents or owns, so they can be sold, and maybe not full time, but for that times or 3 days a week work from home, and that's I think that's very good. There's a lot less commute, and we've been as efficient or maybe more efficient than we were before the working from home logic. There's a risk that, like, I don't know yet how big of an impact that's going to make, but things that we develop are very much less serendipitous. Like we don't, there's no like a water cooler talk to maybe come up with a very interesting idea that we wouldn't have otherwise. All conversations are very objective. So maybe we got to figure out some way of finding that serendipity back, and I think that's actually a very relevant challenge. I don't know yet how we're going to respond to that. but in
Exactly.
general, like,
Yeah, and we'll see how the next few years go with that. I'm going to turn it over to the students now. Kendra and Brian, can you tell me or tell us how your education experience has been so far, and how has COVID affected your education? Let's start with Kendra.
Yeah, so COVID has ruined a lot of things for me. But overall, like, my experience has been great. The faculty and my peers have been amazing. And I feel like graduate school is really beneficial in that way compared to undergrad. I like everyone, like Max said, everyone's like on the same kind of wavelength, like everyone is there to support you. And so with COVID, like, everything is transferred online, and it's just been really hard to, retain that information. And again, like with the opportunities thing, I had a lot of plans and hopes for internships, and I did finally get one in the public sector, so I'm really happy about that. And we'll just see how what the future holds. I hope to graduate in person, but I don't know how likely that is.
Yeah, so I think the same thing goes for me. Everything has become through Zoom and online, and many technical difficulties. In terms of internships and opportunities as well, I know a lot of municipalities are cutting back on their budgets, so they're not hiring as much, as well as opportunities to collaborate with municipalities or agencies with capstone projects have decreased. So it's definitely a lot harder to get hands-on experience, and I think that's pretty crucial for grad school and to become an urban planner.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's important. That's the difference for sure. So the ones who are currently working right now, how was your education experience? And did you find that it was enough to help you in your current jobs, or did you feel like it was lacking?
I definitely, my school was good at some things and less good at other things. My master's program was very much practical. So like we worked directly with agencies within Richmond to try and help them with different projects. So we try and weave in some issues within the city into every course that we took. The GIS program was awful, and that's really not the fault of universities. It's not something that they really focused on. And I was lucky enough to have those skills beforehand, but I know a lot of people who didn't come from an urban studies background in their undergraduate degree who went into the urban planning master's degree. They struggled a lot with some of the technical aspects of planning when they got out of school. They felt that they were unprepared.
I'll jump in.
Sure.
I mean, urban planning is such a broad field of expertise. It's like so specialist, but studying it, you could end up doing anything. And I think this panel is a great example of that. If you threw me into doing Max's job tomorrow, I'd have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if Max did what I was doing, he'd probably be like, what the hell is going on? So it's really hard, I think, for universities to really absolutely nail it in what you end up doing as a job. Like my university, we did, in a 4-year degree, we did one subject. So you do 8 subjects a year. So they did one subject on what I do for a living. And I felt really let down by my university. Like when I started my job, I was like, why did they not train me better or teach me more? I paid, $40,000 for this degree. But I think that the issue is universities there to kind of show you the options, give you a broad understanding and of that technical aspect of planning and what impacts it can have. And then it's up to you to get a job in the section that you really enjoy, and then start specializing and narrow down and start studying further into that field. So if you're really into climate change, for example, is one that a lot of people specialize in, that you could go through university and you'd be like, well, I didn't learn anything about climate change at university. But then you go get a job in the public sector or in a certain firm or research partnership, and then all of a sudden you start digging really deep into it. And you wouldn't have known how to do that unless you went to university and got this big understanding of how the whole system works. So that's from my point of view in Australia.
I think the main role of the university is to create a kind of confusion in a way. Like when I studied, like a lot of what I do today was not even remotely possible when I was studying. It was just 16 years ago. So I do a lot of data mining from Waze and Google Maps and from real estate websites, and I put all of that together, and that was unthinkable 16 years ago. So the most important thing the university can give you is like to give you a critical kind of thinking, of course, point ways to give you like options and to let you mature the main concepts of the profession, and all of the rest is going to be, I'm absolutely sure in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we'll be doing stuff that we can't even think of right now. And so it's not the university's role to like arm you with the tools, but to arm you with the critical thinking that will allow you to develop your own tools through time. I think that's the most important thing about university.
One thing that I would like to add is that the most important thing that you're going to gain from getting your master's degree is the networking. Like you're going to be put in place with, you're going to be put in touch with different planners in your locality, wherever you're located, and you're going to automatically be tapped into other professional planners who have already graduated, and you can leverage that. You're supposed to leverage that. I think that's important, and I wouldn't be where I was if I didn't leverage some of the connections that I made through my university.
Amazing, thank you. Oh, Kendra, did you have anything to add? Or
No, I was just gonna say I 100% agree with that. If you don't put yourself out there in your graduate year, especially, like you're not gonna really find what you're looking for or find the jobs you want. So
it depends also a little bit on what kind of school you're in and what the level of technical background is that you're getting from it as well. Because if you do some transportation planning courses where you learn all about transport modeling, there's a lot of background knowledge that you'll get that doesn't require you to focus so much on the soft side. So you just have to, if you find that people skills is not your forte, you might definitely find a way in transportation planning, looking at modeling, for example, but also in land use planning and looking at all the legislation of it. There's universities with a stronger focus on that. So it does go both ways, I think.
all right,
There's something in it for everyone.
definitely. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to open it up to audience Q&A now. So again, if you have any questions you'd like the panelists to answer, please type it in the Q&A box now. I know that a bunch of people have already typed in some questions, so we are going to go through them, and our panelists have answered some privately, but for the sake of the audience, I'm also going to repeat them out loud, and in case any other panelists have answers as well. Jamie asks, do you recommend getting your master's in the country you wish to start your career in? I'd say that ultimately depends on what country we're talking about too. Max, can you tell me, in the US, is it necessary to get a master's in urban planning?
So I don't know if it's 100% necessary to get a master's in urban planning. It'll definitely give you a head start. But to the question of like, does the location of your degree matter? So like, I think in the US less so, just because it's fucking massive. But like, if you like, you can get a degree anywhere, and I don't think it would matter that much. But like, if you're gonna work in the US, I imagine you're getting it in a US degree. But I would, and like, Lieven, correct me if I'm wrong, like in Europe, like you hop, skip, and jump from any other country, like I think it would matter less where you got your degree from.
In Europe, it does actually matter a lot where you get your degree from, because a lot of the universities are very country focused. And if you want to move to another country, you'd probably have to go in the public sector, for example, pass a test where you show enough knowledge of the legislative side of planning before you can actually start. So yeah, that was a downside that I had. And I remember I struggled because I graduated from the Middle East, and starting in the UK, I couldn't find a job where I lived initially. So I had to move down to London, where I found a job in planning enforcement. They took me in on an entry level, and yeah, a lot of the stuff that I learned in my master was transferable. A lot of that soft skills side, and you sort of learn the country specific things on the go, so that allows you to grow quicker, I guess. But it definitely isn't so that in Europe you can move from one country to the other, because there's a lot of difference in interpretation and in standards in planning between countries as well.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, an anonymous asked, what software do you guys use in your job, and what do you recommend as a student in starting to learn now?
Microsoft Word is probably, I always say to all of our staff, like, we can do our job with a pen and a pad, really, for what we do. There's not really any software, I think, that is hugely, used in what I do. Like, so long as you can use Google and you can use Microsoft Word, you can pretty much do our job. Using AutoCAD and things like that is definitely helpful from a, conceptual point of view, but realistically with what I do, anyone who's drawing a plan needs to be licensed. I don't want to take the liability for drawing something if I draw it, 10 mil out in an entire city block, and I draw it this far incorrectly, then all of a sudden I'm liable for that. So there's specialists who do that kind of thing. They're not usually planners, in all honesty. They're usually architects. But yeah, other than that, a limited knowledge of CAD, and just, that's probably all you need for my sector.
I particularly have developed my master's, and I'm currently in the final part of my doctorate, and I use a lot of Grasshopper, Rhinoceros and Grasshopper, which is I actually learned it for parametric architecture, drawing nice looking panels and all that. But I've found out that you can use it for urban analysis a lot. And I think it's very interesting how it's much more visual than GIS. And there are a lot of plugins that the community develops, and I've actually done like a lot of analysis of data from Waze using Grasshopper, and you can have all kinds of visualizations and find out all kinds of conclusions from that. So that's a little bit off the beaten path, I think, for urban planners. Of course, GIS is probably the main tool. People will be either ArcGIS or QGIS. And I think it's unescapable, because that's when you're dealing with urban scale, you're gonna have databases that are in GIS. So, but I, for one, I have very limited knowledge on the processing part of GIS. It can open things, it can analyze things, or very some basic analysis, but not a lot. I think being curious is the most important thing, after all.
I would just like to add, like, it's worth taking like an intro level GIS class just so you can learn to interpret maps better. Like, you're going to be looking at maps all the time, and like the knowledge of like, oh, what am I looking at when I open this map will always be helpful.
Yeah, can I just add, as a student studying GIS as my master's, I think GIS is pretty important, especially when you're making maps as an urban planner. You want to have good cartography, as you have multiple audiences. It's not just the government, you also have public for civic engagement. So making kind of aesthetic maps is important.
All right, amazing, thank you. Let's see here. We've got tons of questions. Some have been answered already. Some I'm not sure we'll have the time to really go in depth of. I'm sorry, guys. We're gonna do the best we can to answer your questions. Let's see. Cameron asks, Max, you had mentioned that your fellow grad students with limited exposure in urban planning felt a bit underprepared during courses or after graduation. Did any of the panelists have a non-urban planning related background prior to pursuing their master's? As someone with somewhat unrelated background, BA in history, are there other ways to gain some familiarity with the technical aspects of planning before pursuing a master's? Anyone can jump in.
I can relate to that because my bachelor's was in history as well. Actually, I had to take a course to move from history into planning as well, which was interesting. But what you learn in history is you learn the critical thinking and the soft side of it, and a lot of that helps you in your master's as well. So if you're interested in it, I would definitely say go for it, pursue it. And was there another part of the question that I forgot to answer? Sorry.
You pretty much answered it, yes. Okay. Thank you, Lehman. Oh no, sorry, and yeah, what can someone do to prepare for the technical aspects of it?
Oh yeah, that was a challenge for me as well. But I've always had an interest in things like SketchUp and the background, for example, for transportation modeling. I actually learned a lot through SimCity as well. There's a basic set of stuff you can do. But I wouldn't be afraid to just jump in, and it depends what you want to do with your master's, whether you want to be more in the land use side, whether you want to focus on transportation planning, environmental planning. There's so many different options for you out there that you can still learn on the go. So I would say no, just jump in.
Yeah, there are tons of resources out there, free resources out there that can help you get better at GIS. So like step one, take a GIS class and actually try. And step two, if it's not working out, like find some of these resources and just take the time and practice, because practice will make you better.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's actually a free version of something ArcGIS-like that allows you to do spatial analysis on the go. It's called Geoda, which I used. It can just help you to get a bit of an idea of what you can do with it.
Awesome, thank you. So we've had a few related questions. Let's see here, relating to doing masters in one country and working in another, and how easy is it to travel with your education and your experience. I've also had people send in these questions as well. Basically, if I as in someone, do my education in the US, can I work in Europe, for example, in the field in urban planning, or do I need to have an urban planning education in Europe? So Rafa, I know you said you had experience in Europe and in other countries. Can you tell us more about how you were able to travel with your work experience?
Sure. I think because when I got the job in France, and then it was an office that had a branch in Morocco, but it was actually in architecture, and I had it doesn't matter, your background doesn't matter that much in architecture, your portfolio does. So what you can present, you can do that. Your skills are actually much more important than your formal background. So I wouldn't be able to actually practice architecture in Europe with my degree. I haven't officiated, whatever you call it, validated in Europe, but I wasn't going to sign any projects. I was just going to, be a part of developing 3D models, and I worked in the new cities design as well, but working on Photoshop and AutoCAD, and so with that level, with that kind of job, you don't actually need formalities. Of course, if I was going to work for the city or try to open my own practice or anything more formal like that, I would definitely need to validate my diploma. But what I did was just, I was on a tourist visa, sent out my portfolio, got picked up by quite a few offices actually, chose one, and worked from there. And drawing invoices from Brazil, I had a company in Brazil, so it was very informal, let's say, and that worked out all right. But I didn't expect to, I had a year Niche could stay there, and didn't expect it to extend beyond that. So maybe if you want to actually move somewhere else, you're probably going to need to validate your diploma and all that.
Okay, and ultimately it really depends on what the role is. So Alex, for example, if someone that wasn't from Brisbane tried to apply to your company, what are the hurdles there?
Yeah, so you don't need a degree. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to be registered or licensed to be a town planner or urban planner in Australia. So like a lot of the planners who work for local government don't even have degrees. They've just either been there for so long that they are kind of just put into that role, or they started in administration and then kind of got a good feel for it and then just worked their way up. But you know, if anyone wanted to apply for a job here, I mean, we would definitely entertain it. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter where you studied. I don't think I'm not speaking on behalf of the whole of Australia, but I don't think it matters where you study. If you had a bachelor's degree in America and you got a master's in Europe and then came and got a job in Australia, if anything, I would say it maybe gives you a leg up, because it's kind of, well, this person's got this experience from all around the world. Let's grab them and see what they have to input into our projects. But in terms of development assessment, with what I do specifically as a planner, it's very state focused. So if someone from down south in Australia, like in New South Wales, I'm in Queensland, if they applied for a job at our firm, I would kind of look at it and go, well, this person's not going to know any more than like my sister who's a dental nurse. So like in terms of the kind of planning that they're going to be doing. So, you know, you need to get experience in local government or a small firm and do, you know, an unpaid intern, for example, is very common here. And once you have that experience, then you kind of can get a paid job. So I think it doesn't matter where you study or what you study, as long as it's planning, you know, you can pretty much get a job if you put your mind to it.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have Anna who asks, can you recount an instance where you failed or made a mistake in your career or in school, and how you recovered from that, whether successfully or not?
Is this an interview now?
Yeah.
The only really, like, because so in the public sector, like there's not really an opportunity for mistake. You're defending your work. You're defending why you think this is the best way to move forward. The only time that I think you can really like mess up is like if someone in the US, if someone FOIAs you, and Freedom of Information Act, if you're a public figure, you have to give up the information of what they're asking for because it is public record. Saying something you should not say, like if something's not totally approved, but you are, you like imply that, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. So like before I was a park planner, I used to work in zoning department in a different municipality, and I worked on approvals for non-development projects, so special use permits to operate businesses that typically wouldn't operate in certain neighborhoods, depending on the zone, subdivisions, encroachments, vacations, very boring stuff. But like all the time I get the question, like, because you have to pay a fee, and a lot of times small business owners don't want to have to put up like a fee in order to get it, because there's like, oh, what if city council doesn't approve it? But like the odds of city council not approving it are incredibly small, but like I can't tell them that because there is that chance, and then I'm in trouble. So like it's just watching out for stuff like that and making sure that you're not over promising, or under promise, over deliver. That's kind of what you want to focus on.
I really think, like, I could list out 1,000 things that I've done and completely stuffed up that I've then had to go backtrack and work on. But I think that is the process of being a planner, is trial and error, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and then implementing the best approach. I think you can't just have a one-size-fits-all kind of mindset when it comes to urban planning. You really need to take on every single different option. And you might try something and it might completely backfire, and you're like, you know, I thought this was good. You've run it past your peers. Everyone was on the same page, and then you gave it a crack, and then it blew up in your face. So then you backtrack, reassess what you're doing, and then pushing forward. And we have that project that I mentioned earlier today, that we've got 3 different options to move forward, and I've given our client 3 options. I gave him what I thought would be the best option to move forward, and he's now said yes to that. So we're going to spend $100,000 of his money going with the option that I've recommended. And now if that, and that has risks involved. So if that blows up in my face, that's now mine to wear. So I've now spent $100,000 of my client's money on something that just completely didn't work. And then it's always in your mind going, well, if I went for option 1 instead of option 3, would this have gone completely differently? But that's part of the process of being a town planner, being an urban planner, I think.
Totally. All right. We're at 3:59 now. We did start a few minutes later, so if the panelists are okay and if everyone's okay to just go a few minutes later, then we'll do that. So we did have a couple of questions, one from Thomas, one from Cameron, both relating to the same thing. It's regarding putting together a portfolio when applying for their master's in urban planning. So let's see here. Cameron says, a program I'm looking at for my master's in urban planning and urban design has the option to include a portfolio, but I don't have a background in architecture and only a minor in planning. What kind of material do you think would be beneficial to produce for my application? So this is, I think this might be more US related, or unless you guys, everyone else has had experience with doing this, but Kendra and Matt, can you speak to your experience with that?
Writing examples. If you don't have any technical maps or something like that to put forward, writing examples are always helpful. You're going to be doing a lot of writing. If you work in the public sector in planning, writing reports that will get approved or denied by public officials, county board, city council, whatever that may be, planning commission. If you have writing examples and can show that you are a competent writer, that'll go a long way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I did not have to present anything. Well, I'm also not in an urban design program, which I was considering at one point. But yes, I would recommend writing samples as well.
Okay, great.
I think if you you're probably gonna be doing some practice on your own, downloading programs and trying stuff, and spatial analysis, and I don't know, walkability scores or whatever you want to do. You can follow tutorials on YouTube, and the outcome of that can be a good looking image, and you can use that. You can we like to think we're very rational animals, but I think we're very, very emotional too. So you get a good looking portfolio, it's some nice images, and I think that goes a long way, even if whoever's looking at it doesn't like to admit that. So if you're doing tutorials on YouTube, or interesting spatial analysis on GIS, and you can do that just from practicing and finding out how stuff works, and you can produce some nice looking images, I think that can go a long way too, even if you don't have a professional experience with that.
Awesome. Okay. Anonymous asks, how did you ultimately decide on what type of planning you wanted to pursue?
I can jump in. I actually just fell into it, so we do development assessment is kind of what we call it in Australia, which is, putting together projects, lodging them to local council, and fighting them essentially. I really just fell into it. I needed to get a internship as part of our degree. So you have to do, I think it's 30 days worth of work placement to actually get the piece of paper to say that you have the bachelor's degree. And I just ended up being in a private consultant firm, and I just loved it. As soon as I started working, I was calling council and having these negotiations and informing our client, and everyone's happy. And, your job is to, get good results. And I really enjoyed that. And I didn't even think about doing anything else in urban planning at that point. I was like, well, this is what I want to do. So here I go. So I think any opportunity that comes to you, even if it might not be exactly what you think you want out of your planning degree, I think just jump at the opportunity, get some experience. You might love it. You might all of a sudden realize that that is not what you want. And you go, well, I wanted to get a job in environmental planning for the state government. and there's a lot of mines in Australia. And my friend got a job there, and so I wanted that job, and she got it, and I was like, I wanted that job. And then she started telling me about it, and I was like, I don't think I want that job. That doesn't sound like what I thought it was going to be. So I'm just going to take this job over here at this private firm and see what happens. So definitely don't shy away from any opportunity, even just because it's not exactly what you want out of it.
I completely agree. I think there's a fine, like, you have to find the balance between, sailing the wind, the conditions, the circumstances, and go in whatever you want to go. Like, you set your sail towards a certain objective, but you're always subject to the conditions of the sea and the wind and all that. Sometimes you go towards a different, port than what you wanted to at first, but you gotta, be able to read the circumstances and go with the flow, keeping in mind your ultimate objective, and occasionally, if you think that's the case, adjusting that objective. But I think I've seen a lot of people fail that they just had a one-track mind about doing this or that, and then sometimes the circumstances are not favorable, and you end up frustrated. At the same time, you can't just be just not sailing at all and just going wherever the wind leads you. I think there's a balance between setting your objective and being able to read the circumstances and adjust your objective according to circumstances.
Awesome. And then on that note, for the students that that just graduated and are probably struggling to find a job right now in the field, do you guys have any advice, any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with them?
Well, I can definitely relate because I did just graduate with my bachelor's degree, and I was really frustrated when COVID hit. Like I said before, I had so many options and opportunities, and they just got totally slashed. So I've come to the point where I'm just like, I will take anything. I will literally just put myself out there and apply to just anything and everything. And if that doesn't work, just keep practicing your skills and then just keep applying, even if it's unpaid, because everyone wants to be paid for their work, but at some point you just have to bite the bullet and just take on what you can.
Here in Australia, there's you pretty much won't get a job unless you do some kind of unpaid internship. But what I find as a director and the person who employs people is the familiar, when someone's name pops up consistently, and it doesn't necessarily need to be it could all be in the same place, but it could be anywhere. So I think just getting involved in the community of urban planning, and if you're here in this conversation, then that's exactly where you need to start. But for me, it's if I meet someone at an industry event, some kind of industry event, and then they pop up in a webinar, and then they add me on LinkedIn, and then they comment on something on a post on LinkedIn or on our Facebook page, and then they send us a message on Instagram commenting on a project that we did. Then when they apply for a job, I'm like, oh yeah, that person, I've seen them around. Let me open up that resume and have a quick look. Whereas if it's just someone out of the blue I've never heard of, I can see the resume, I'd download it, have a look at it, but I'm like, I don't know who this is. And why would I pick them over this person who I've encountered 10 times elsewhere? So I think getting involved as much as you can in the industry that you want to be in and making yourself known. LinkedIn, in my opinion, is one of the best places to do that in Australia. Just you can connect with the director of every single planning firm in the whole of Australia if you wanted to. So I think just getting involved, getting your name out there, letting people know that you're open to work. That's what I'd be doing.
Okay, anyone else with last words of wisdom? Nope, don't think so.
I'll chip in a bit, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I totally relate with all the COVID situation and trouble finding internships. My suggestion would be to work on your technical skills, GIS skills. There's a lot of open data out there now on the web, so you can download anything and do basic analysis, and then that could contribute to you having a portfolio that you could show.
Okay, thank you guys. I believe unless anyone has any other comments to say, I believe that should wrap up our webinar today. We did go a few minutes over time. I'm sorry, guys. And I know we had tons more questions, but unfortunately, we only had the hour to do. I will try to answer them or try to email you guys afterwards because I will keep track of the chats. But yeah, this concludes today's panel. Thank you so much to the panelists and everyone watching this for committing time out of your day to join us. If you liked what you saw today, please leave some feedback in the chat box. I'm already seeing that. Thank you so much. If you're a professional planner or a planning student that would be open to joining a panel like this in the future, please shoot me an email, theirvinlam@gmail.com. And if you want to see more webinars like this, or perhaps maybe more niche webinars where we can have more in-depth conversations, please send that to my, please send the feedback to my email as well. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone just so that you can have my contact information and ask any other questions you might have. But yeah, we hope that you found this helpful and that this answered some of the questions you had and you found what you're looking for. And other than that, we wish you the best of luck in your career path, whatever that may be.
Kimberly, one thing you could do is if you want to put the unanswered questions in like a Google Doc and then share it with all of us, like we can just kind of like dive in as we have time.
Exactly. I was just thinking that too. Yes, that's a great idea.
I would also be welcome to share some of my contact information if any students have any questions, because I know I read a lot.
Sure thing. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll get permission from all the other panelists, and I'll probably send out contact info as well if you guys want to ask more specific questions to these guys. I'm gonna get everyone to wave goodbye to the attendees. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for organizing this as well.
Thank you.
Amazing work. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you, Kim.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you.